Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Today we have a colloquium speaker from the Office of Sustainability at UF. Her name is Hannah Aloha, and Hannah is the Sustainability Communications Coordinator for UF's Office of Sustainability. Her role involves overseeing outreach and engagement programs, as well as the graphics and messaging for current and upcoming programs across campus, including waste recycling, staff, faculty resources, and the climate action planning process. And so she's going to talk to us about that, the climate action planning program at UF, and learning and listening for climate action at UF. So please welcome Hannah. Thank you for coming to speak with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. And I am really excited to be speaking with all of you today. I'd love to speak to faculty more about this topic and hear feedback and input. So we're really excited that you all requested this presentation, and there will be some opportunities to engage throughout it. Okay, there we go. So I already got a great introduction. Thank you. So I won't go into much more detail, but I'll just say that I'm a UF grad alum, and I've been working with the university for almost 5 years now. So I'm big Gator fan and really passionate about where UF focuses on sustainability and climate action, and looking forward to discussing some of that and some of my work with you all today. So I'll start off, we already covered introductions, but I'll talk a little bit more about who is the office, what do we do, and I'll dive into climate action at UF, the history of it, and where we've been in the past and where we're going now, including UF Climate Action Plan 2.0, which is the ongoing process right now to update the Climate Action Plan. And then we'll cover some ways that you all can get involved and have time for Q&A at the end. So, before I start off anything, a lot of you probably are familiar with this definition, but just to ground us and think a little bit more about what our office focuses on, and that is defining the term sustainability, because it's got a lot of different facets, a lot of different definitions, but from our office's perspective, we define it as meeting the current needs without compromising the ability of future generations to satisfy their needs. And this looks like a lot of different structures. One of the most common ones is this idea of the three-pillar intersection of social, economic, and environmental needs, and balancing those to find sustainability in systems. There's also much more complex structures, including the Sustainable Development Goals, which many faculty do incorporate into their coursework. But this covers, you can see it still breaks it out into almost those three pillars of social needs, development needs, and environmental sustainability needs, but breaks down these pieces into a lot more detailed sections. And this is probably the more modern approach to sustainability, and it's how our office approaches sustainability and thinking about the overlaps of lots of these different projects and how they connect on campus and beyond. So about the office more specifically, and I'm just going to touch base on this because we often get this question: what is the Office of Sustainability? What do we do? Well, our mission is to make the university and its operations, education, research, and outreach a model of sustainability. And as I mentioned before, that kind of follows the three-pillar intersection of ecological restoration, economic development, and social equity. So in pursuing this mandate, we work with faculty, students, staff, anyone in the UF community to generate the knowledge, the skills, the values, and practices on campus and beyond to contribute to a more sustainable world or a more sustainable campus. So our focus is not, we do work with academics a lot, but our focus is mostly on the operations of the university and how we can support that. And this is a slightly outdated flow chart of the university, but we are located within the operations aspect, and you can see this is a kind of administration flow chart, but we're over here in the green one in operations. So that gives you kind of a little bit of an overview of where we sit in the university. Okay, And like I mentioned, our projects range all over campus and all over different sectors. So we consider there to be several different areas of impact that our office contributes to and works with departments across campus to support their efforts. So a lot of times our work is involved in just supporting what other groups are doing and finding those connections and those collaborations, and not necessarily owning every project, but that's really the crux of sustainability is the network that supports it into the future. So these are just some general areas, and I'm going to touch on a lot of these in more detail as I talk through the climate action plan as well. So climate action at UF. So I'm going to do a little bit of a, if you'll indulge me, we're going to do a little bit of a an engagement. So if you could tell me, you could shout it, raise your hand, unmute yourself, or tell me in the chat what you think of when you hear the words climate action. Anyone? All right, we got one in the chat. Efforts to cut emissions.
Conservation.
Marches. Model outlooks. Greta Thunberg. Better use of water. Extinction. Rebellion. Lead buildings. Fantastic. Did I miss anything there? Think global, act local. We got some more conservation. Global collective action is struggling. Wow, a lot of great responses. Smart transit. So you can tell that when we're talking about climate action, it really touches on a lot of different things. It's not just one simple action that you take. It's thinking about how all of these systems work together to reduce emissions, but also improve the resilience of our systems to prepare for climate change or climate impacts. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen really quick, but I'm going to break down some of the things that are being discussed in the current climate action plan update. But just generally, when our office is thinking about climate action, we're thinking about how all these multiple areas, ideas, and goals are working together to reduce climate change impacts, mitigate climate change impacts, including how to reduce emissions, and also adapt to incoming impacts. So a little bit of, before I dive into that, I'm going to touch on a little bit of history of climate action at UF. So in 2006, President Machen was one of the first of 12 university presidents to sign the President's Climate Commitment, which is coordinated by a nonprofit that works with higher ed and climate commitments called Second Nature. And they are continuing to be one of the leading bodies in coordinating higher ed commitments to climate action and resilience planning. So that was in 2006, and that signature launched a process of developing the first climate action plan between the task force that was coordinated by the Sustainability Committee. That took a couple years to get the ball rolling. That was the first ever attempt to track and formalize the greenhouse gas inventory to understand where UF stood and what UF could improve on, and put out this climate action plan version 1.0. Then over the course of several years, university made a lot of, it met a lot of the goals that it had set in the first climate action plan, including several steps of reduction in greenhouse gas emissions per square foot. I think the most recent analysis we have is an 18% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions per square foot from the 2005 baseline by 2020. So that was one of the goals that was put in the plan, and it was a goal that was met. In addition to that, UF also pushed the needle in several different areas, including increasing solar generation on campus starting in 2015. There are about 300, I think it's 350 or 360 kilowatts of solar now being produced on campus. And that was a big jump from where it was, which was 0. And then other things like establishing a LEED Gold minimum for new construction. And then some other transportation projects like expansion of infrastructure for electric vehicles and goals for electric vehicles to be incorporated into the fleet. And those are just some of the highlights. There are a lot of other ways that UF continued to push forward some of these needles that weren't even in the original climate action plan, but were still being, it was kind of the momentum was going towards those projects. And then in 2019, the Office of Sustainability worked with the city and county to host a community resilience building workshop. And this is a workshop that was the first of its kind to bring together people in the city and the county and UF to talk about the impending climate-related hazards that Florida needs to consider and how our communities might work together to prepare for those. So this was because of the kind of national move towards resilience planning and wanting to think more about resilience and not just about mitigation when it comes to climate action. And we followed a model that a lot of other higher education institutions used. And this kind of sparked the momentum moving towards rewriting and launching the CAP 2.0 process. So to prepare for that process, the Office of Sustainability, along with the Florida Climate Institute, held a couple of really large climate action listening sessions that were open to the public and received hundreds of faculty, students, and staff attending, and we got a lot of really good engagement from those events as well. And they started to feed into how we were going to structure the climate action planning process in 2021. So in the beginning of 2021, our office, along with a strategic consultant that we are partnering with called Trust, launched the process to update the climate action plan. And that has been ongoing since. So it's currently in the process right now, but I'm going to give you some updates on what that process has looked like so far and where we're at with discussing some of the goals and strategies. Before I get into that, I forgot I have a couple other things just providing more context. This is a map of all of the universities that have signed that President's climate commitment and or the President's resilience commitment. So just to give you an idea of, UF isn't doing this alone. There are a lot of other peers to learn from, but there are also a lot of ways that UF can be a leader and work with the understanding the baseline of what people are doing and trying to push that even further. I also wanted to briefly mention, if you haven't heard of this is just giving you some context about the imperative that UF has to address climate change and to mitigate and prepare for climate impacts. Thinking about this is an ongoing study with the Yale Climate Change Communications Group that they conduct every year. And it shows year after year that more and more people are they have moved past being aware of global warming and are alarmed or concerned. You can see the majority are either alarmed, concerned, or cautious. And that, it can be kind of scary, but it's also helps keep that momentum going. I know a lot of times if you are in the climate action world or you're discussing it, it can feel like a lot of people aren't concerned about it or they're not aware of it. And studies just show us that that's not true, and that we can harness a lot of that engagement, a lot of that momentum to move towards more aggressive action. And just a little debrief in case anyone hasn't heard of some of these reporting bodies and some of the ways that we are analyzing our reach and impact with climate action. This is just another iteration of the urgency of some of these topics. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which just released a new report this past fall, which I can link and send the link to you all as well, but is the United Nations body for assessing science related to climate change. And it's based on their reports. It's likely that they're anticipating that our world will see a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in global temperatures between 2030 and 2052 if we continue at the current rate. And as I mentioned, when we were doing that resilience building workshop with the community and with the city and the county and other groups in Florida, it became even more clear that Florida is especially vulnerable to some of these climate hazards, including warming, sea level rise, extreme heat, flooding, and all of the ways that those impacts will affect things like water and infrastructure and agriculture and even migration. So just a little bit more detail on the urgency of what we are considering in this plan. And lastly, another piece of context that I'll provide. This is a top 10 that we don't necessarily want to be in. This is some of the largest universities in the US and their total emissions per square feet. And you can see we are there in this top 10. We're not necessarily the worst, but we definitely have room to go and peers to look to and see how we can model the best practices for that. Okay, so the next question we get is, and I might have said it in a few different ways, but I'll just clarify now. What is the UF Climate Action Plan? What does that mean? The University of Florida Climate Action Plan, as we're considering right now, is a living campus-wide strategic framework, so a living document for reducing and mitigating UF's greenhouse gas emissions in order to reach carbon neutrality, as well as improving the university's resilience to climate change impacts. So that still probably sounds a little bit nebulous, so I'll talk about what the emissions are and where they're coming from and how resilience factors into that too. Before I get into the emissions, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the ongoing process. How are we approaching this planning process? So the planning process is based off of several different stakeholder groups, including our office and the support and planning team and our strategic planning consultant trust, 6 really large working groups that focus on 6 different areas, including energy, built environment, transportation, offsets and finance, resilience, and academics. In each of these working groups, we've got liaisons that we work with closely to continue to develop and strengthen their feedback. We've also got an advisory board, which I think we might have some advisory boards members in our meeting today, but they are helping to provide another level of feedback to these working groups and the outcomes that are being suggested. And we continue to try and engage the UF community throughout this whole process. This CAT presentation that I'm giving right now is one of the many methods that we're working on to engage the community as much as we can and get feedback and participation in this planning process. So like I mentioned, there are 6 working groups right now. This is just an overview. I'm going to go into each of them in a little bit more detail. But this is the process as it has moved forward so far. I talked a little bit about the community listening sessions, the working groups launching in early 2021. Now we're at the point where early in this fall, we work to compile and refine the working group recommendations, give them to the advisory board to review and give feedback. And now we're continuing to refine those goals and strategies and developing implementation plans for each of those. So the process is it might look like it's almost done, but there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of refining and finalizing a draft plan to move towards the approval stage. Okay, now we're going to talk about emissions. Let's get into the details on this. So this is our most recent inventory of UF's greenhouse gas emissions. And you can see the majority of it comes from energy, but which is about 76%. But there are also significant contributions from employee transportation and student transportation. This includes commuting, air travel, business travel, anything along those lines. There's also a small percentage that comes from waste. And then there's another small percentage that comes from miscellaneous. This includes things like fertilizers, refrigerants, and other emissions such as that. So I'm going to go step by step and talk about energy, which was, like I said, 76% of our greenhouse gas inventory. And that is because the majority of UF's energy resources are used for cooling, dehumidifying, and heating UF's main campus buildings. They do this through steam and chilled water, which are produced centrally and distributed to buildings across campus. This, just to give you a ballpark of what this looks like, it's about $40 million annually, and it's a very complex system that UF uses. So I could probably do another 40-minute presentation on it, but I'll just link to, and I can share these links afterwards as well. And we have more information on our website that breaks down how steam and chilled water are used on campus to cool, dehumidify, and heat our buildings. But what is being discussed in the energy group, things like district energy efficiency, the efficiency of our distribution systems, what are the energy sources, where is the energy coming from, how is it being produced, renewable energy options, including on-campus solar, as well as purchased solar. So lots of different topics being discussed in that working group. And next, the built environment, which also contributes to the energy. There's kind of overlaps in it. This is more focused on optimizing new and existing buildings to reduce carbon emissions and maximize that energy efficiency. So it includes a lot of the sustainability certifications and a lot of the programs that go into making those buildings and those construction projects as sustainable as possible. So UF does have a long history of a commitment to LEED. There's over 80 LEED certified building projects on campus, and we do have the first gold LEED and platinum LEED buildings in the state. And they're going to continue to try and be the first in a lot of other areas too. So in the built environment, we're talking about what is the energy efficiency at the building level and optimizing those building systems to be more efficient. Also talking about sustainable building certifications and how to improve and expand those programs, and even building maintenance and upgrades, which is actually a really big part of maximizing the efficiency at the building level. Next, I'm going to talk about transportation. So I mentioned, I think employee transportation was about 15%, student transportation about 5 or 6%. So total, that's still a pretty big chunk. It's about 20, maybe a little bit over 20% of our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And as I mentioned, that comes from air travel, commuting by bus, commuting by car, study abroad travel, business paid travel, like traveling to conferences and things. All of that is incorporated into the calculations of the greenhouse gas emissions. But I'm just going to quickly share some of the programs that work to minimize that and are helping to reduce that greenhouse gas emissions. And if you aren't aware of some of these alternative transportation options, I highly recommend checking out the UF TAPS website, where all of these are listed in really good detail, including new programs like the e-scooters, and it's not mentioned on there, but the campus connector, which is a mini kind of connector service on campus. I mentioned it earlier, but ongoing programs include expanding the electric vehicle program, electric vehicle infrastructure on campus. And we also have the carbon neutral commuter program, which is a voluntary program that employees can enroll in. It's pretty simple. You basically enroll in a voluntary payroll deduction, and that money goes directly to a local carbon offsetting partner called We Are Neutral. And it's as simple as it can be as low as $1 per pay period to offset the average employee commute. So it's a great way to offset your own personal commute and also contribute to the reduction of UF's greenhouse gas emissions. So in the transportation group, some of the things that are being discussed include the on-campus transportation options, transportation to and from campus, electric vehicles, and also the UF fleet and how the UF fleet calculates into that emissions inventory. And lastly, so the waste is not being discussed heavily in the climate action plan because it is such a small percentage of our greenhouse gas emissions. It likely will be included in larger sustainability strategic planning. But because we get so many questions about it every time I do a presentation, I just wanted to touch on it briefly. UF's ongoing waste programs are pretty robust for such a large campus. Annually at UF, we see about 5,000 tons recycled, about 800 tons composted, and about 9,000 tons landfill. If you weren't aware, styrofoam and plastic bans were eliminated from UF dining locations in 2012. They've been working really closely with us throughout the pandemic to try and offer as many compostable materials as possible in the dining halls with the new like carryouts and things like that. And they're doing a great job on still keeping styrofoam and plastic bags out of there. And if you have been in any of the bathrooms on campus, you've probably seen the paper towel composting program. And if you've been in the Rights Union, you've definitely seen the Gators Beat Waste Station, which is across from the Starbucks and has some walkthrough step-by-step instructions on sorting waste effectively. And I'll just touch on a couple other things in waste. If you have questions about recycling, I definitely recommend some of these resources. Recycling can vary from county to county, even city to city. UF shares the same waste stream as Alachua County, so all of their resources are super accurate and really helpful, but we also have some of our UF resources that can walk you through more specific items that you might encounter in labs or construction. Okay. So with that, I covered the main areas of emissions, but there are 3 other working groups in our climate action plan. So I'm just going to briefly talk about what are the things that they are discussing. And that includes in the offsets and finance, talking about quality carbon offsets, how to develop policies where we can purchase and maintain quality offsets. Short-term funding options to fund some of the goals and strategies in the climate action plan, and long-term financing options to also fund some of the goals and strategies in the climate action plan. So they're thinking about some of the financial background to these, the other groups. In the academics group, they're talking a lot about supporting climate change literacy and learning outcomes for all students at UF, thinking about campus as a living lab and how to expand those opportunities, access to materials, access to educational materials about climate action or about research that's going on, and how to make that more accessible to students or to researchers across the university, and connections to research and extension. And the resilience, this is definitely a new aspect of climate action planning for any higher education institution. So our approach to it has included thinking about cohesive planning efforts for better outcomes, even just getting a better understanding of future climate impacts and how that affects our scenario planning, reliability of resources, reliability of resource systems like food, water, energy, those kind of things, and how that contributes to social and community resilience. So I'm going to do another little engagement thing. Now that you all have heard my long spiel about the CAP 2.0, I would love to hear what things you see that are connecting to what your organization does or what you work on as faculty members, or maybe just your department in general at UF. And you can unmute yourself and I'll type it out or drop it in the chat. Recycling, we make a lot of paper. Well, I'm glad I included that then. Researchers in department, sustainability research. Oh, new lighting for energy efficiency. Nice. Students who may be very invested. Great. Any other connections that you're seeing? Efficiency.
Yeah, I can do that.
What collective action can do? Service projects. Computer energy. Reduce single-use plastics. Events.
How many majors
Oh,
in
a
there?
degree track in geography and sustainability studies. Nice.
No, I think it's gonna just go live.
Okay.
Awesome. I'm glad that so many people are seeing the connections between what you're doing in your classrooms or as students to connect with, that might connect with the climate action planning process. We think that that's really vital to the success of a climate action plan is drawing those connections across the university and understanding how it contributes to everyone's goals and everyone's mission. So I did see one question thinking about, students who maybe are very invested in climate action and want to get involved. So I'm going to talk more about how you can be involved. And so let me go back to sharing my screen. So our office approach to the climate action plan and just generally any project we're working on is this idea of institutional change. It's a really valuable way to think about organizational change. And that's because when we're talking about things like climate action that are pretty transformational and moving your mission and moving your goals forward, it's based really heavily in culture change. So we keep that in mind when we're developing these, and that's why we think it's so valuable to engage the UF community throughout this entire process, because it is working towards a culture change. And finding those common goals and values, it's great to hear what the geography department goals and values are in some of this presentation and understand how it might connect with this process. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because even just engaging with this is an act of being involved. And I think that we want to encourage this as much as possible and continue to share this vision that's inspiring more groups to get involved. Because we know that knowledge doesn't always spark action, but the combination of getting this knowledge and then finding outlets for everyone to engage in or connect with is really important for our office. So specific engagement opportunities with the UF Climate Action Plan. If you want me to do this presentation for your class or for your student organization, you can definitely request one. We'll be doing them virtually and in person for the rest of the semester. I will share the link for the form to request one. We also have an online UF Climate Action Plan comment form, which is live 24/7. If you have any thoughts or ideas, there's nothing too small or too big. If you just want to share your concerns or your ideas, you can jump into our UF Climate Action Plan comment form to share your thoughts about UF's climate action and where it should be going. We also will be hosting some public listening sessions. Those will be announced really, really soon. We're just working some of the logistics on hosting those effectively. And that'll include more details about what is being discussed in CAP 2.0. If you want to get involved with sustainability in general, I recommend for students, there's tons of sustainability related student organizations. You can also follow us on social media, shameless plug here. We share a lot of updates on all of those platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. I also highly, highly recommend our Sustainable UF Monthly e-newsletter. It's an exhaustive resource of events happening on campus, opportunities, job opportunities. We share resources on there, articles, really great resource if you just want to check in monthly with what's going on with our office and what's going on with sustainability around campus. And we have a really comprehensive website. If you haven't visited it before, I highly recommend we go through all of the different campus initiatives that I mentioned at the very beginning, those areas of impact. And a lot of things are relevant to academics as well as operations on campus. So highly recommend that resource. And I just like to share this graphic that was recently created by some thought leaders and researchers who work directly in climate action. And it's thinking about how do you figure out what you can do for climate, because it is kind of a wicked issue. There's so many ways to approach it. So if you're looking for a way to personally engage and you're struggling a little bit, I recommend looking at this Venn diagram and finding where those intersections happen for you to help guide your actions. Because there are so many ways to get involved. There's not like a wrong answer. It's just how can we all contribute to this big effort. And the website that I mentioned is there. It's www.sustainable.ufl.edu. You can also reach us via email and social media. And with that, I will stop plugging the Office of Sustainability Communications. But sorry, that's my job. That's what I have to do. But thank you everyone for listening. And I think we still have plenty of time, I hope, for questions, maybe just a little bit of time. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we're good on time. We have
Great.
15 minutes.